I'm going to share my views on G4s today, because in the wake of the current attacks here in the UK, where in Manchester we had the Manchester Arena bombing, killed a load of innocent children, and then just last night we had a load of people mowed down by some crazy guy, and then he got out and then continued to stab people as well. Now, I feel it's time. It's time for me to share something that I've been keeping inside for about 4 or 5 years at least. And that's about G4s. Now, whilst terrorists basically go around terrorizing people, there are also people who live off the back of that terrorism, and they use that terrorism to push their agendas too. Makes them no better than the piece of shit terrorists. Basically, they will all use the same thing to push their own personal agendas. They might not be actually committing the act, but they're certainly thriving off the back of it to cause harm to the human race in many cases. And like our governments, for instance, their motto is never waste a crisis. So if there's a crisis, what can they do? What further restrictions can they bring in that they could never bring in before under normal circumstances? What can they change? What suits their agenda overall? And there's certain patterns going on which are really coming to life. Things that I wouldn't have shared before because people would have called me an absolute crazy out there, say conspiracy theorist. But now that, a lot of things have changed over the years, I feel it's time that I can share my views. And actually, I don't think that people will be so anti those views. I feel that people will see what I'm saying here. Now, it's obvious to me that there's been a destruction of the UK police force. That's obvious. They've turned the UK police force into absolute robots now. They've had a lot of powers taken away from them, as in personal powers, what they can do. So is the sergeants and everything else. I mean, my dad used to be a police officer, and so did my uncle. And a lot of family members are in the armed forces. I never ever would want to choose that path myself. But what I'm saying is I have a balanced view on this. I don't just look at this from some naive outlaw or something like that. I'm looking at this from a balanced viewpoint. And what I see here is a complete change around in the police force, the destruction of the credibility of the police force and the police officer themselves. They're sent out and actually break the law themselves in many cases, especially what you see during these fracking protests and things like that. And of course the miners' strike is another one, which my uncle was actually in, so I have direct knowledge of exactly what the police were told to do, what they were instructed to do, and what was happening during the miners' strike. So I'm coming from a very balanced point of view here. And what I see here is destruction of the purposeful destruction of the police force. The police numbers are down, and I'm seeing G4s gradually creeping into its place. Now, this is a private police force, so obviously it doesn't come under the rules and laws that an average police officer would come under. I mean, we're policed by consent here in the UK. So we've had that for centuries long, and it's always worked reasonably well when they stay within the rules of law. And it's sort of pulled out the bad guys. But the trouble is now, what you're getting now, what you're seeing now is the boost. Whether G4s can do nothing wrong. And that's what gives you the indicator that there's an agenda here. So G4s, it doesn't matter what it does wrong when it's put in positions where it needs to police large events like the London Olympics or wherever. When they make massive mistakes and big cock-ups, they just fine them a couple of £1 million, which is nothing to that corporation, They say bad boys, they make it look all public, all down in the public eye, but the agenda gets pushed on, the contracts come their way, that they just suddenly appear with all these major contracts, and their staffing level goes up, and their vans get bought, their security prisoner exchange vans and everything else. And you see them getting stronger and stronger. And now what you're seeing now is the actual G4s becoming more present now at large events. Like, for instance, today, just read a post by somebody just before I'm making this video, and it was one of the prompts. I've been wanting to do this for 2 days, but it's one of the prompts that made me sort of go, right, I've got to do it now. Basically, she said that that G4s are now policing the Manchester, the victims of Manchester bombing. They're doing like a love concert today, and under the light of the terrorist attack last night in London, on London Bridge, they are now policing that event. They're the security services, should I say. So yeah, we're witnessing this paid for police force, because that's what it is essentially. We're witnessing paid for security company creeping in everywhere. And what concerns me about this is the fact that I don't see many differences from G4s than I do what happened in the World War II when the vans or whatever transport drove up the streets of Germany and started picking people who they considered minorities, or people of certain faiths, or people who were a threat to those in power. And I witnessed that, you know, we all know what happened there in history, and they went around, they took those people, they stuck them on trains, and they disappeared. And, you know, is this what we're getting to now? Because when you look at the actual track record, what's actually happening is the government and everybody behind the scenes, the big corporations, seems to be empowering and handing G4s these massive contracts. We're getting the triggers now of the, remember what I said, that you know, they can't just bring something in, they need events to in order to take advantage of, which makes them terrorists in themselves, because they're feeding off the terrorization of the public, and then they're bringing in agendas. So you know, it's no different than a terrorist who wants to enslave you. In actual fact, the terrorist is enslaving you, but by proxy. So what you're seeing is this matchup between, you know, we suddenly got these people in private vans now, ready and able, should the call out come along from the government, to start taking people away and start driving up and down streets. I mean, if one of these vans come up your street, just like they did in World War II, and they decided, like, these people in this house are Jewish, but, you know, let's call them Muslim or whatever today, or just considered as against the government, and they suddenly knock down that door and they take them away in G4s vans, because there's obviously a shortage of police vans and police force. Would anybody actually go out and help that person, knowing that they've never done anything wrong? They've always said good morning to them, they've always been nice to them. Would anybody go out and help those people where they see them disappear off into secret courts, which we actually have here now? Ironic. Will they see them just taken off into secret courts and never heard of again? Will they just sit behind their curtain twitching and watching all this going on, even though they know they've done nothing wrong? Just believe in their government, you know, sit back in apathy. And it always amazes me, really, that you know, I always say everything's the opposite of what you think. And you look at the, you know, the people who say, you know, if we don't learn about history, then we're destined to repeat it. Well, I would say if we learn about history, then we're almost bringing it back, because what we're seeing here is a pattern. And it's no different. The collapse of a country's economy, you're seeing you know, stupid ideologies coming out now that could collapse the UK economy, albeit it's in control of the banks anyway. You know, let's face it. The people don't get in power they want; they just withdraw the funding, and that can be everybody's bank accounts. That can be, you know, the flow of materials. They're in charge of everything. With the corporations and the banks work together. That's it. You're screwed. You've got no money, no way of exchanging goods and money. So if they want to crash the economy and they want to make a worldwide crash, they need to make sure that the right people are in power, so that, you know, so that they can blame it on them. And these public figures, they pop up, you know, these saviors like Jeremy Corbyn, piece of shit, pops up, and he comes along. He's the figurehead for 4 years. Everything crashes, and then they all point the fingers at him, just like they do point the fingers at Tony Blair and then Margaret Thatcher. And they all go off, resign, or get kicked out when they've no longer got the public influence, and everybody points the finger at that person in the history. They don't point the finger at the new people who get in and say, why don't you overturn all this? Why don't you do away with these laws that they brought in? Why don't you stop these wars that they started? Why don't, you know? No one looks at that because it's already been done. That's placed on, say, Tony Blair, for instance. That's him. That's the past. How could he do that to us? They don't look at the people now. And all these things start happening, and you know, the secret courts, they get brought in, and nobody cares. They will care one day. But to cut this video as short as I can, don't want to make it too long. When you look at G4s, you start to see symbolism. You see patterns of behaviour. You see the way that all you need now is a little run of terrorist attacks, maybe civil unrest, because we know we're heading there. We've been heading there for many years in this country. Be a crying shame, because the trouble is with civil unrest is a lot of innocent people get their buildings burnt down, and a lot of innocent people get hurt during that process. And that's even police officers, you know, and civilians, shop owners, you know. It's ridiculous. But at the same time, you know, these events that happen sometimes create a level playing field. Sometimes they enslave further, you know. We've had quite a few things happen in history with us. Not wanting to go off on any tangents, but basically you've got G4s coming along now, and they're now going to become rapidly the new police force by sudden terrorist attacks and diminish, you know, the current police force are being diminished, so they will be stepped in as the backup, because there's no one else to do anything, and they're the obvious other choice. They'll be going around collecting all the prisoners, you know, chucking them in secret courts and that. And you look at the symbolism of the G4S logo, and you can't deny, and I know it's hard to say this, not wanting to make a mockery of the Second World War or trivialize anything in any way, but the G4S symbol itself is not far from a swastika. Think about it. Makes me sick. You know, how do you get away with it right in front of your face? You can almost see this secondary force being built that's going to run amok. And actually, you know, but that's just, you know, musings. That there's nothing, you know, nothing to see. Don't worry about it. I don't very often do videos like this, because I'm not one who believes in sharing fear. And you know, I hate the awareness brigade who always got to be pushing things that everybody sees as being absolutely obvious into everybody's faces every day, and traumatizing people through that. I hate that. You know, these people who raise awareness and so say are you know, it's by sharing stuff that people know already and just lowering everybody's vibe, you know, and getting everybody down. There's pieces of shit themselves. But you know, this is something like maybe a view angle that I haven't heard anywhere. I've never seen anybody. I know that, say, on the fracking community side, they see G4s as a bit of a police sneaking in police force. I got some very aware friends who also can see this creeping in. And, you know, your observations are the swastika and you know, the resemblance to the actual G4S symbol. and the way that they're behaving, the way they've got the ability to transport prisoners. You're only a little step away from, just like having in the UK here, we're the most watched country in the world. We have cameras on everything. That's fine if the cameras are being used for catching criminals. But what happens when a dictatorship gets hold of them, or they decide to become a dictatorship? What happens when they get hold of these cameras and they get hold of the overtake the vans and the G4s, give them new powers all of a sudden under an emergency sort of rule, civil unrest law or something, then you suddenly see all these people being given power, and the rest will be history. But I share this mainly as warning the good people who quite often they value my work and see, is a viewpoint that you don't see anywhere else. The resemblance to World War II is almost like that being built up by stealth, ready to switch with an event that could be created or not, or just rode off the back of. And it's good to be aware of new ideologies, new different ways of looking at stuff, so that you can rightly prepare for your families and think about what would you do if you've seen that happen. Obviously, the most important thing for most people is to look after your own family, and I don't blame you. I could tell you now, I've been there many times, even in the last week when I've had to look after my own family, and that's it. And I think that it's something you need to look at and think about. It won't stop me doing anything because I don't really care. I've got no fear. I've got no fear of sharing this, and I've got no fear of MI6 or someone sitting down and watching the video and labeling me as a radicalized human, because as far as I'm concerned, I'm just sharing some musings, and if they want to do that, it just outs them for who they are. But I don't think I'm that important. I'm just small fry, just an average guy, and this is the way we get by. Disorganized, but unified in your thoughts, where you're going, but completely disorganized. No rulers, no leaders, no anything. Just all sharing your thoughts and becoming very wise and aware of where things are going. So let's just hope it never reaches that. Let's hope people don't watch this video and say, he was dead right. Let's hope that people go, well, that turned out to be a load of rubbish. That would be perfect, wouldn't it? Wouldn't that be a lovely world to live in? But all I see is the terrorists are being given... How powerful was that man who blew up those children? How powerful is he now? He's gone off wherever he's gone now, as his consciousness, but he's got this humongous power and hold over the UK. He's terrorised everybody, exactly what they want to do. And the government has rode off that terrorism, and they've decided to ride off the back of that and do what they want to do, to push their agenda. And each one of them are terrorising all of us in their own little way. You start looking around you when you're walking down the street soon. Maybe even they'll put a curfew on cars or ban them from city centres altogether. You know how much the government wants to get you in a bus or on a train. They don't want you, as an independent free traveller driving around in your car. It'd be perfect. The destruction of the car overnight. And this is the way my mind works, because what do we see? We see things happening all the time that are absolutely crazy, and restrictions coming over us. And these people, these terrorists, those 19 hijackers on 9/11, most powerful people in the world. Because off the back of them, they've virtually enslaved everybody. There was things that had to be done, like the security of cockpits on an airplane, but you didn't have to go all out. Iris scanning when when I entered America, is iris. It's all your fingerprints. It's you're almost being interviewed for everything you've ever done, any crime that you may or may not have committed, and just to walk in the country. And it's the same everywhere now. It's all becoming the same. All these cameras go up. They're very powerful terrorists, these. And remember that they were put in that position. They could have not held that power, but they've been allowed to hold that power. and has actually been promoted and fed off by the media. So you've got to ask yourself, where are the agendas going here? What's happening? Who am I actually being terrorized and enslaved by? Is it the terrorist who's opened that gateway? Yes, but you know, who's actually carrying that on? Who's actually terrorized? Who's walking around with the machine guns around the British streets? You know, when we're an unarmed public, it's a crazy world that we're heading into. Glad my kids are a little bit older. You know, but yeah, I think that's where I need to end, and you know, I'd like to see, you know, hear about your thoughts on it. Please, you know, when you see this video on Facebook, post your thoughts. You know, call me silly. Don't bother me. You know, I've gone past the stage of criticism or being praised up or whatever. I'm not in it for that. I'm just here to help those who listen, and maybe make people a bit more aware. Maybe it'll kill it off before it starts. Who knows? Bye.